Hello folks, welcome to part 2 of this Vulkan test really of the Beta 1. Now today I thought it'd be really interesting if we compared doing this same flight, same conditions, same aircraft using Vulkan and then using OPENGL. Now all my settings, and this is the same for the last video as well, haven't moved at all. I haven't changed any of my settings from my usual sort of way of running things, and I'll put that up in the right hand corner now so you can see that. But I must admit, now that I've had another second look at this Vulkan business, there is definitely a frame rate increase, but it's not a huge amount. But sat here at a fully modelled detailed Orbx airport in a very complex aircraft like the TBM 900, which is the best GA aircraft ever made, but anyway, that's another video for another time. I was getting 45 frames per second. Now as soon as I switch that record button, I'm down to between 35 and 40 frames, so I have lost a good a really good 5 to 10 frames per second. So unfortunately that is kind of annoying when I'm trying to illustrate the effects of Vulkan, but unfortunately video recording, and that will be the same for all YouTubers out there, will affect performance. It's just no way of getting away from that really. And if I live stream this, it'd be even worse. But as you can see, here we are at Southampton, looking very, very nice. Watch my tail, my aircraft. Crazy man. And what we're going to do, we're going to take off, obviously, from Southampton, and we're just going to go up the road to Goodwood. And then I'm going to do the flight all over again, but in OPENGL. We've got our little Abitab screen here to show us our frame rate. That is a little bit laggy actually. I've been looking at the actual frame rate in X-Plane itself, and I'm getting about 40 frames per second with sort of dips down to 35. So yeah, let's see how we get on here. This, by the way, is the brand new TBM release as well. I'll put that in the right hand corner, what version I'm running. But this is specifically designed to run with Vulkan. I just love the guys at X Aviation. The Hot Start TBM is just in a league all on its own when it comes to X-Plane GA aircraft. And I'm using this purposely because this does rob you of at least a good 5 frames per second as well. So we're kind of almost at that stage now where we can run X-Plane in a headset like the Reverb with really with a decent 45 frames per second with Orbx airfields and things like that. So we're nearly there, guys. And remember, this is a beta, so it's not optimized yet. That's really important to remember, that this is not a public, well, it is a public release, but it's a beta release. It's not the full fat version that we're going to see. This is going to be a long process. Everything feels, dare I say it, very smooth at the moment. I've got to say, the Oculus Rift S, which I haven't tested yet, is going to be a video I'm going to do separately to see what kind of performance and how that feels as well. But I'm running high settings here on purpose, just to show you what you can get away with. Look at all those buildings, wow. Now there is a definite degradation in ortho quality. And there's just a few little stutters. I'm using the Windows Mixed Reality software again, just so you can see any stutters. You'll see them when I see them. But you see that ortho there is nowhere near as crisp as it should be. But that is basically the the trade-off of what Vulkan is doing, and that is to manage the VRAM. Now I'm using a 1080 Ti card, 11 gig, but I'm not sure if it makes a difference what system RAM you have, but I've only got 16 gigs, so that might be having some effect. In fact, while we're at it, I'll just put up my system specs So I'll put them on the screen now. That is what I'm running at the moment, an 8600K processor at stock speed with 16 gigs of RAM, a 1080 Ti card. I've got to say, this feels very nice. Let's have a quick look outside. So in that flyby view I just did there, you notice how smooth that was. I always think that when you see the aircraft fly from one side of the screen to the other, is a very good indication of how the sim is running. And that was pretty damn smooth actually. The ortho imagery is definitely taking a hit. I may try using the texture quality, I might put it to high. Just out of curiosity, there's so many different tests you can do and tinker around with, and I plan on doing that a lot now that I've actually finished work. I'm very excited as well that I've finished my DCS trials, or the main ones anyway. They're still going on at the moment, and I have decided which fighter aircraft that I'm going to start learning properly. And I've also bought a map as well to go with it at 50% off. So I'm not going to tell you what fighter aircraft it is, so have a guess in the comments, but I'll be revealing that very soon. But I'm very happy with my choice. It's been fantastic trying them all out. Yeah, I'm definitely pleased with the one I've bought. So here we go, 36 frames per second, 35, 36. I know, I think usually it'd be interesting once we do the same route again with the OpenGL. What it's going to be like, but we are generally hitting the higher 36, 35 frames. But as I say, the ortho is looking a bit mushy down there. That might be something that could be improved as the betas, go along. Goodness knows how many of them we're going to have. I'm just so happy that Vulkan's finally here, especially now, during this very difficult time that everyone is facing, having to be in isolation as such. It's like being grounded when you were a kid, but only it's a lot worse and a lot longer. But yeah, because of that, let's indulge in the passion of flying, and now we have the Vulkan beta to play with. It's all good. So as we're flying to Goodwood, you see here I'm getting about 40 frames per second or over, and I'm recording. Now I've never had that before in the TBM with this level of detail. So that is confirmation right here, right now, in this aircraft that I'm getting better performance in Vulkan by quite a long way actually. I'd usually be getting about 30 frames per second, but I'm hitting 40 frames plus. And bearing in mind, when I'm recording, I lose a respectable 10 frames per second. I also really like how with this new 1150 version, in the plugin admin page, which is that button there, unfortunately that won't work in VR, it will show you what frames are being robbed by certain plugins. So at the moment I had a look before, and the TBM is robbing me of about 5 to 6 frames per second, as much as 8 frames per second actually in cases. But I'm not surprised. As I say, this is one of the more complex GA aircraft out there. Right then, so we have gone completely the wrong way because I've been too busy talking. No, we haven't. It's alright. We're not too far away. Echo Golf Hotel Romeo. That's where we're heading to. Oh, I love this aircraft so much. Every iteration, every update, it gets better and better. The flight modelling, it's just like a fine wine. And I just love how they've actually updated this aircraft in time for the new Vulkan release. I have no doubt that they've probably been quite instrumental in giving them feedback. This is really smooth. As I say, I'm planning to test the Oculus Rift S as well, which in many ways will perform much better than the Reverb. It always will do, because not really to do with the lenses or the resolution, it's really to do with the software. The asynchronous time warp software lets you go right down to very smaller frame rate figures and you still get a smooth performance. But I have to say though, this is feeling very nice. And there's a lot of detail here. Right, we'll put the landing gear down. I'll just get myself centered again. And look at the detail here. Oh wow. Now I'm using 3J FPS as well, which is limiting my load factor to, for my objects. But I must admit, I've noticed that doesn't really make a difference anymore, whether I have that at maximum frame rate or maximum quality. I don't really lose the amount of frames I used to. Whoa, that was the first stutter we've had, which was a quick one. Right, let's get this aircraft configured. We've got landing lights still on because we're rubbish and we forgot to turn them off. We'll just trim the aircraft, full flaps. Got a visual there on the airfield. You know, that's another thing as well. When I used to zoom in, sometimes I get a real bad stutter, but I'm not getting any of that. That is a view. So I've recently done a video of Goodwood actually in the Cirrus, the Coronado SR22, which is a beautiful aircraft. Highly recommend that one, especially when it has its update, which will be coming soon. And you know, it's a really nice area, this. So yeah, it's the only thing really that I'm noticing in terms of the visual fidelity. You're getting a bit of a blurring with the ortho textures. But that might be more of a beta bug than anything else. Right, okay, I'm really making a hash of this approach, but these videos are more about the performance and Vulkan more so than my flying skills, or lack of. I haven't flown the TBM for a while actually. It's an absolute pleasure to be back in the seat again, getting current. Here we are. Let's see if we get any stutters on approach here. This is the crucial bit right here. Everything is very smooth. Looking at my frame rate, which is about 30 frames per second at this point, I think. I think it's a bit higher than that actually. I think Avitab is a bit slow to update its frame rate counter sometimes. Let's see if we can make a decent landing here.
Airspeed.
There we go. Making sure that inertial separator is on so that we don't get anything in those engines. Right. So that felt really smooth to me. So yeah, I think we're basically on the upwards of about 36-37 frames per second, and that's with the X-Plane settings I'm using. I'll put them up there again in case you've forgotten. That's what I'm using. Very high settings, using loads of add-ons. You know, there's plenty of YouTubers out there who are trying vanilla X-Plane and getting very smooth performance. That's fine, but I mean that's pretty obvious you're going to get smooth performance. I like to stress test the Vulkan. That's what I'll be doing, because that's what I'm interested in finding out the worst case scenarios and seeing how it behaves. And I've got to say, this is a big improvement from my first flight, which I basically just went straight into it. This is feeling good. I'm definitely getting a frame rate increase, and there seems to be less stutters. Anyway, see if we can remember this performance of what we've had here, because now I'm going to magically transform you back to Southampton in the same aircraft, same conditions, but we're going to be in OpenGL, so I'll see you in a second. Welcome back everyone, we are now in OpenGL mode, and the eagle-eyed viewer may notice something very different about Southampton. This is default, and there's a reason for that. I have been having an absolute nightmare trying to figure out what's been going on with my system, because I've been having loads and loads of crashes. I thought it might be the TBM, I thought it might be some of my settings, but no, I've been having so many crashes, and I've put it down to Orbx airports. They do not work very well, if at all, in the latest 1150 OpenGL mode beta. So unfortunately I've had to disable them just so I can do this comparison test. Now of course, now I'm not running Orbx airport, so that's going to have an effect on the frame rate, and I'll probably get better frame rate, but if you can see, I'm getting loads of stutters anyway. So even without all the Orbx style airports, I'm getting worse performance than having them in with Vulkan. So I think in that sense that's a bit of a conclusion in itself really. But trust me, I have had an absolute nightmare. I've been spending hours trying to work out what it is that's been causing all these crashes. And that's really what this beta is all about really. You know, finding out what works and what doesn't. Now most people won't really be interested in the performance of the OpenGL mode anyway. This is just for testing purposes to show you the differences. And I mean really already I can tell, I haven't even left the ground yet. So but hopefully we can manage this flight. This is what you'd normally expect. Oh my god, are we actually going to make this without a crash? I'm leaving these in, guys. I know it's not much fun to watch, but this is just basically a test comparison of OpenGL versus Vulkan, and I think we can already make some conclusions already with the difference. Now I've been reading the comments from the last video, and I really appreciate all of your comments, and because you guys are really knowledgeable, and you're right about my very first flight in Vulkan was quite stuttery because I didn't give the shaders time to do their thing and compile. Right, we're going to go straight into a takeoff here, sod it. I don't care about flight procedures, I just want to get this flight underway. So my very first flight in Vulkan, and maybe even yours, will be a bit stuttery, but once those shaders have been compiled, things are a lot smoother. But it's quite incredible to think that I'm getting worse performance using default airports than I am if I'm using Orbx style airports. Oh, it's an absolute nightmare. Look at this. Now I think once it settles down, hopefully we're going to be alright, but oh, this is awful. I do apologise for anyone who's watching this. Really, it's going to be not much fun to watch, but as in terms of a test, a raw test, this is the information I think that's really important to show. So let's have a quick look outside once we settle down and get on our way to Goodwood. So as you can quite clearly see from that pan around shot, and more crucially that flyby view, which I think is a really good way of illustrating the stutters, that it was a pretty awful, not very smooth experience, shall we say. Before running Vulkan, if you remember, we did a pan around shot and we did the flyby view. That was completely smooth, and that is with Orbx airports thrown in as well. So let's have a look at Avitab as well to see our frame rate, because before we was getting about 35-40 frames per second. That's while I was recording. So let's see what kind of frames we're getting now in comparison. Wow, look at that. We're getting about the same kind of frame rate as we was before. Now that brings up another interesting point, that remember, even though I'm getting loads of stutters, the 1150 version of X-Plane, even in OpenGL mode, should run better, because they had to basically rework a lot of their texture management and VRAM processes even before doing all the Vulkan business, because they admitted themselves that there was a lot of memory leaks, a lot of problems that came up during the the process of changing to the new Vulkan API. So you will still get a really good performance in terms of frame rate. Look, we're actually it's weird, isn't it? Because we're getting really good frame rates, but it's not consistent. And that is the key thing about Vulkan. It's the consistent smoothness of basically all of those shaders and the texture management and the VRAM is a lot more clever now, so you're not going to get those horrendous, kind of freezes of the screen, which in VR is really, really not nice at all. So I think that's really the conclusion of this particular test. So now things have calmed down a bit. You can see it's a bit smoother now. We're getting a nice 45 frames per second, and things, see, there's still the odd stutter there. And that's because basically X-Plane's now loaded in all of the orthos it needs, all of the airports in this like big tile, so that's fine. Right up until the point where I reach the end of that tile, and then there's more Orbx airport, shall we say, and things going on, we're going to get loads of stutters. That's where Vulkan is going to pay dividends and be much better. So I think, as I say, in conclusion, we can deduct that Vulkan is definitely an improvement. It's just not the improvement I was hoping. I was hoping for a bit more performance. But remember, I am using loads of add-ons, and I'm keeping my settings very high, because that's really what we want to know, isn't it? How does Vulkan perform in this very early stage, in the beta state it's in? This is B1, so we've got a long way to go. I think it's good news, really. I think it's a huge success at this very early stage, and who knows where we'll be in, say, another month or so's time, when we really kind of iron out those bugs and the optimizations kick in.
Sync rate.
This is nice and smooth, but I expect it should be, really, with default. Can't believe I can't run my Orbx airports with OpenGL in 1150. That's a shame. That's kind of it's hardly been the most scientific test anyway, but unfortunately that's going to hinder the results a little bit. But really, I think, as I said before, it's all about the consistency of the frame rate and not the actual raw frame rate itself, particularly in VR. Oh god, it looks rubbish, doesn't it, compared to the Orbx version, shall we say. So I hope that's been of some use to you guys. As I say, it hasn't been the most reliable test I was hoping for, simply because I can't run my add-on airports, weirdly, in OpenGL mode. In Vulkan, all of my add-ons work perfectly. Which you'd think it'd be the other way around, wouldn't you? But never mind. We'll just park up over here somewhere. So there we are, guys. That is my first sort of test of Beta 1 using the HP Reverb. Now I'm going to do a further test using the Rift S. I haven't actually used that in X-Plane yet, so I'm really excited to see how that feels. I'd imagine the performance will be probably better than the Reverb, particularly due to the Oculus software which I've mentioned. So that's it for now. Take care, guys, and I'll see you again on the next one very soon. Bye bye for now.